Lou, I think you found the most interesting man in the world, and I'm really excited about today's episode. So, why don't you bring the audience up to speed on who we're talking with?
And we don't have to buy a beer.
Two soft drinks here, just in case. But the beer.
Alan Paltrowitz, welcome to the Liquid Lunch Project.
You said liquid lunch, so that's why I have the two drinks ready. But Lou, Matt,
Our two drinks are slightly different than yours, Darren, I must confess.
different strokes for different folks. Still in the middle of the workday. We'll see where it goes in a couple of hours with the drinks.
Darren,
Nice.
we all go way back. We're old chums, but you're here for a purpose. Our audience, as you know, is small business owners, and there's one business that's always fascinated us simply because of its complexity and its dysfunction, and that is the music business. How an artist gets paid today is so different than how an artist got paid just a couple of decades ago. I mean, walk us through something along the lines of if I was a singer in the 70s, how would I get paid then? And walk us through the evolution of music as a business today.
Assuming you're talking about a prominent artist, an artist that's chasing hits, it used to be you toured to promote the album. Nowadays, it's the exact opposite way around, where the album might be a loss leader, so you have an excuse to tour for 2 or 3 years. And there's a lot of new income streams that weren't really there because artists couldn't directly reach the fan base. There wasn't things like Patreon, where you're siphoning money from your fan base by giving them an exclusive content. Related to that, there weren't things like Kickstarter, where the fans can directly fund the album in advance and you still own it. It was harder to license your things overseas to international record companies. Publishing, the way that your publishing money breaks down, that's totally different. And I think the biggest difference of it all was 15 years ago, the commercials that you were watching on television and the movies that you were watching didn't have as much cool artist music. There's a lot of sound alikes. There's a lot of original music. So it really is apples to oranges. Or do you have a better way of describing it than apples to oranges?
Not really. Not really at all. I think you did a great.
Watermelons to grapefruits. I don't know.
I think you did a great job at describing it. Right?
We usually say Campari to tequila. That's our beverage of choice.
Yeah, I'm gonna guess who the tequila guy is.
Yeah, conglomerate to conglomerate, different kind of stuff there. And then another big difference is artists kind of realize that the album isn't the thing that's going to keep them afloat. It's the thing that they leverage the coolness of their career of to get that tequila brand. Like, how many celebrity tequilas can we name right now? We got Sammy Hagar's Cabo Wabo. Do you guys know the others offhand?
I don't know about the music industry, but I know a lot of celebrities entered in tequila. You have George Clooney with Casamigos.
Oh yeah,
Michael Jordan with Cincoro.
Cincoro,
right?
yeah.
The Rock came out with Tremina.
Terramana.
Yep, that's it. But yeah,
now, is that creative branding, or are they simply replacing a stream of income that doesn't exist anymore?
I think it's both of them. And you also, okay, if you were a singer in the 70s, odds are you were a singer, a superstar singer, maybe you got into a movie or two, and that was it. And nowadays, it's kind of like you have the hit or two, you parlay that into a celebrity vodka or tequila, you start up your own record company that signs other artists who you maybe produce and you have some points on. Maybe you have a fashion line, a pop-up store, a fast food pop-up truck. It's kind of like you're going, okay, let's get 9 things on the board and see if 1 or 2 stick, while I'm going to go out every summer and do a package tour, which is branded after me.
Well, it's almost like the artist now becomes the entrepreneur because they're looking for different revenue streams to come in, right? We've all heard that old adage, you need 7 revenue streams, right? As an entrepreneur, in case one thing goes bad, they're not just worried about writing lyrics, if any of them even write their own lyrics anymore. But it seems to be like I never actually thought of the album or the songs being a loss leader. So you definitely changed my mindset there. But I could definitely see how it's beneficial, right? It's almost a popularity contest at the end of the day, and they're leveraging their influence that they have.
I would say that the loss leader music concept kind of goes back to the mid 2000s when Walmart decided that it was going to do exclusive album titles. I think the first one that they did was the Eagles. And between you guys, myself, and anyone listening, they may have fudged the numbers a little bit, but Walmart was losing money on every unit sold to get you in the door to buy, I don't know, a fridge, a TV, your couple $100s of groceries. So they ultimately did that with Kiss and some other big bands. AC/DC was another one. And those figures may have also been inflated just a little bit. But we saw Best Buy do that for a little while. Target did it with a Pearl Jam album. Major retailers were doing that for a couple of years until I think they kind of realized, ooh, we're losing too much money on this.
You know, you brought up Kiss. Gene Simmons is probably the king of this, right? Licensing everything out and having everything from coffins to, you know, drinks under the sun, right? You think he was the first one to actually think outside the box and go that way? Or could we
You know
trace it
what,
back
guys?
even
I have to
further?
interject. I remember getting a job out of college, and I walked into one of those department stores, you know, with just barely, you know, with my $500 credit limit, right? And I had to buy a couple of suits and a couple of ties, and I actually bought a Jerry Garcia tie.
Sure. The Dead have been one of the leaders in merchandising and licensing. I would say Kiss was first because Kiss was pumping it out in the late 70s. And I don't think the Dead was as commercial in the 70s. But Kiss has had waves of all that. And you find over time certain bands will license anything to anyone, and others are very selective and say no. And some of the ones that say no have only started lightening up in the past couple of years. And that went as far as we won't put our music on Spotify because that was a separate licensing deal due to the status of their record contract.
You know, does that, you know, some people would call that selling out, right? And isn't that the last thing you want to do to have to your fan base and say you sold out? Or if we've grown past that point to realizing people need to make a living and they have to do whatever they possibly can.
Totally, we are past that. When okay, I would assume there's certain musical artists that we all like, that they're kind of universal. Like, do we all like Run DMC?
Love them.
I love
Yeah,
them.
we all love Run DMC. They can do no wrong to some extent, but you can buy their t-shirts at the Gap. I think that 20 years ago we might have called that selling out, but now we go, hey, at least they're keeping the legacy alive with cool looking merchandise.
So what does a deal like that actually look like? Because you mentioned Run DMC. Yeah, there's Run DMC. I was just shopping for my kids and I got an AC/DC shirt in Target for them. My kids don't even know who AC/DC is, but they like the shirt and they're buying it and they're keeping their brand alive. But what about the numbers? What do those numbers look like? How much of that t-shirt sale actually gets back into the band's hands?
AC/DC are amongst the best business people, period, in music. So they definitely held out and have a better deal. The first question to ask is whether they have a licensing deal with Bravado or Live Nation or one of the big people, and that it's a sub licensing agreement, or if they're doing a direct deal. But this is not generalization. T-shirts are far more lucrative than album sales.
Wow.
Far
That's
more.
So,
Far more.
gentlemen, we're discussing the results. So
Sure.
let's talk about the causation. How were artists paid in the yesteryear, and what changed to create this huge pivot into all these other streams that we've just discussed?
That is a very loaded question with big words. You're going to have to use smaller words to keep my intellect engaged and all that. You said causation. You know, come on. Do we know that every person understands?
All right. So Darren, Billy Joel used to get paid a certain way
No, I got you. I was
in
just
the 80s. Okay. How was he paid in the 80s?
yeah.
And then what happened to that stream that had to make him scratch and claw and do all this other BS?
Well, overlooking the whole thing is you two, as very astute business people, know when you have success, you renegotiate your deal. So that's the first step of the whole thing, that people see the prior deals that came before them and they renegotiate their deals. They go, hey, we're not going to give you another album unless you sweeten the pot. And a lot of that led over time to reversion deals. Like, we're getting our albums back in 25 years or 30 years. And that's something that happened with Metallica probably 10 years ago. They'd renegotiated their deal in the early 90s with Elektra, part of Warner Music Group. Albums reverted to them. And not every artist is super public about these reversion deals because they want to seem like, oh, we got messed over by the music business. But no, you got your masters back and or your publishing back, and then you resold it again, and then that deal reverted in 10 years and you sold it again. And that's something Motley Crue did a few times for astounding money. Motley Crue a few times have renegotiated the deal. And another thing is, a lot of the top artists are using the same attorneys, and the attorneys know what they negotiated for other clients. So, for example, you remember the Napster, like early 2000s, like banning the people who downloaded Metallica?
Yeah, sure.
Metallica, same attorney at that time as Dr. Dre. I believe the same attorney as Eminem. I wonder why they all kept getting better and better deal terms.
You know, speaking of Dr. Dre, he might be the most impressive out of that merchandising with what he did with Beats and who's the name of that? Jimmy Ivone? Is that
Jimmy
right?
Iovine, yeah.
Jimmy Ivy.
Wait, are we saying his name correctly, Jimmy Iovine? Like, what's the correct Italian pronunciation?
Yavone. Giacomo Yavone.
Yeah, I mean, Jimmy Iovine's an interesting one where he was just like the assistant engineer on some recording studio sessions by John Lennon and Bruce Springsteen, and then kind of worked his way up of, oh, I can be running the ship here. But he's one of those producers where you go, hey, Jimmy, here's a guitar. Can you play a song? And he probably can't play or write, but he's such a good talker. Now, in the case of Dre, who collectively, billions on whatever the deal was with Beats, this is the thing that people don't realize about Dr. Dre. He got super ripped off in NWA because everyone except Eazy-E was a work for hire. And he kind of realized, like, oh, I'm getting the flat fee, got to leave on my own. So Eazy-E was collecting off of Dr. Dre when he left. You follow me so far?
Yeah, I'm with you.
He forms Death Row Records with Suge Knight, and Eazy-E's making money off of Dr. Dre, and he's kind of annoyed by that. And Dr. Dre realizes, oh, I can do that to artists. So he signs Snoop Dogg over time. But of course, some of that money's funneling up to Eazy-E from Snoop Dogg. Other artists on Death Row as well. Eazy-E was making money off of tracks that were dissing him. Now, Dr. Dre eventually made a mint, not just off of Snoop Dogg, but Eminem, 50 Cent, G-Unit, Kendrick Lamar. So Dr. Dre is the epitome of passive income in music.
You know, there's a lot of. I was just watching a TV show that came out on Wu-Tang Clan where they said the RZA did basically the same exact thing with everybody in the clan. He signed them the contracts, but he owned everything. Right?
I've heard that's the case, that it's an upstream kind of thing. And then Martin Shkreli and all that. I don't think he bought the real Wu-Tang album, but people say it's a Wu-Tang album. Supposedly it was just like disciples of the Wu-Tang Clan putting the logo on it.
Whatever that is.
Probably RZA got paid off of that, and RZA's a genius. I don't use that term loosely. He's a genius.
So, they were sleeping for a while, but it seems like they've reemerged over the last 4 or 5 years. I think it might have been after that album was allegedly sold, right? Because I see Wu merch everywhere now. Everywhere on the internet I look, there's Wu-Tang Clan stuff.
Yeah, I don't know if it's that they're big or their logo is big. Like what you said before about your kid with the AC/DC shirt. I see Def Leppard shirts everywhere, and I'm tempted to go up to those people and go, can you name one song by Def Leppard? Because I don't think they can, and it's not a looking down on people thing. It's just people like logos and stuff that fits them. That kind of mentality.
So, Darren, you're an author, right? You've been around the music industry, writing articles for magazines for a very long time. Bring us back. How did you get involved in the space?
When I was a teenager, I wanted to get free albums and free tickets. And somehow I kind of learned, oh, if you write for some publications, you get sent the albums and given the tickets. And I did that in high school and college. And eventually, if you never miss deadlines and You don't flip out at people, you become an editor. So I was an editor in college. And then I kind of went in and out of it. But my then girlfriend, now wife, who Luigi may or may not have played a part in introducing me to,
It's
I
a
don't know.
great story, but we'll save that for later.
But she told me about a publication in New York that kind of needed some immediate coverage, and got back into that, went full steam into that. And again, if you deliver the articles, the publicist or the handler goes, here's my other client. And then word gets out that, oh, you did that one and that one, we'll do this one. And during the pandemic, I turned that into a TV slot that's seen on 40 plus channels a week, plus Apple, Spotify, etc. And that's the side hustle to being an investigator. So
yeah, that's what I wanted to know next. So one thing that I learned that was very interesting to me is Luigi told me you're a private investigator too. So did that come from the journalism angle to find more things out, or was that prior to being a journalist?
I was doing investigative assignments before I was in the PI field.
Okay.
And because I have a master's in library and information sciences, people are like, oh, you know where to find information. Yeah, I do. When you're not good looking, you gotta know stuff.
The only man on this podcast that knows how to use the Dewey Decimal System.
Oh, Dewey Decimal's obsolete, but I appreciate what you did there. Yeah, I've always kind of looked at what I do is how do I find the information, make it concise, so that somebody can read it who only goes, I only got 30 seconds. What can you tell me? So it's a whole career in existence off of that. And I thought I was going to be a lifer in the music industry, but the way the music industry has just consolidated and reinvented itself, I'm just happy to freelance and help out some artists and write about stuff from the outside.
That's awesome. You know, I'm in awe because we don't get many guests on here that have like an exciting career like you. Everybody else that comes on, they're usually in finance. There's some excitement in there. Like, listen, I'm a numbers guy, right? So things excite me. Business excites me, but
Sure.
you actually get to work with like music artists hand in hand, which is pretty cool too. But can it also be daunting at times?
Yeah, you have to get over your fear of public speaking pretty quickly. You have to get over fanboying or fangirling or fan-theming, whatever the correct gender pronoun, so you don't alienate 4% of people is. You have to learn that kind of stuff. You also have to learn how to deal with artists, because artists are generally sensitive, reaction-oriented kind of people, and you have to catch them at the right time. You have to give them bad news the right way. But the other trade-off to the whole thing is when an artist is doing really well, it's because they're amazing. And when an artist is doing poorly, oh, their management stinks. So it's this kind of field where you think that you're doing fantastic, and then the artist fires you because they want to go with another manager.
So Darren, like Matt said before, we're numbers guys. So imagine Matt and I go by. Matt, what concert do you want to go see?
Oh man,
Don't say Springsteen because hey, $5,000 a ticket. Come on.
Yeah, what's up with that? How'd that happen?
They're scalping their own tickets. That's the part of it. Ticketmaster and Live Nation, when I'm assuming this is a Ticketmaster Live Nation thing and not an AEG thing. I can't be sure, but
sure. So let's say Matt and I are crazy.
Yeah.
We go buy two $5,000 tickets, all right, to go see Bruce Springsteen.
Yeah.
Matt's got his USA flag bandana on. He's got his tight ripped jeans.
Okay.
And that $5,000, break it down for us. Who gets what piece of that pie? How much goes to the venue? How much goes to the publisher? How much goes to the artist?
That one I can't tell you because Springsteen will have renegotiated his deal so many times that the normal splits won't apply. And for all we know, like, let me just give you an example.
Please.
I knew this comic who I guess was unsuccessful at the same time that Mark Anthony, the singer, was. And they kind of had this pact, like, if I make it, you're going to be my opening act for the rest of my life, and vice versa. And Mark Anthony made it, and the deal was, you're going to open up for me. And Mark Anthony, one point in his career, the concert promoters didn't want to book him. So he said, you know what? I'll rent out Madison Square Garden myself. So there was no bank on in terms of a promoter. It was Mark Anthony cutting the check for $500,000 or whatever it is to rent it out, and then reaping all the proceeds and making multiples more than he would have had Live Nation rented out Madison Square Garden and went, okay, you're getting 40% of the box office. Like, because he's willing to take that risk.
Moral of the story: always be a loyal friend.
It depends on who that friend is. Sometimes there's raw talent involved, and other times there isn't. But
Well, listen, in that scenario, he bet on himself, so he should reap the rewards from it at the end of the day. But I see more and more, not even just artists, not music artists, but celebrities doing more and more self-publishing themselves and promoting their own stuff. I mean, I think we live in an age where the most valuable currency is eyeballs, right? The more eyeballs you can get on you through these social media channels, whether it be Instagram, TikTok, right? The
yeah,
more influence you have. And it's a lot easier to build a landing page these days than it was back in the 90s where you had to pay $25,000 for it, or a website. And, you know, the only person you really got to pay out there is probably the person that helps you publish the book, or your self-publishing, or your team that's helping you put it together. And, you know, anybody, probably your Stripe account where they take their VIG, their 3%. The rest overall is pretty much, you know, net profit at the end of the day.
Good question. Good thoughts right there. The answer that I have is I don't know, because we are still seeing some people killing it off of the old school business model. And then we see other people doing amazing because of TikTok. But I don't think Bruce Springsteen would be killing it on TikTok. So
Hey, listen, you
Springsteen,
never know. The Rock's all over social media all the time.
well, The Rock is a very diversified person
Yeah.
because he's not just acting in the movies, but he's also producing the movies with his team. And his management team also manages some of the talent that they package.
And I bet if you asked the typical 16-year-old, they wouldn't even know that he was a wrestler years ago.
Probably not. And that's without factoring in the tequila, the books. He's done a few books, the WWE merchandise and appearances that he still makes under a Legends deal, the TV shows that he produces. There's other stuff too. He just has so many income streams going and a team that we don't always know about.
Yeah.
Hey, Darren, have you ever heard Matt do his Rock impersonation where he says, "Can you smell what the Rock is cooking"?
I haven't had that honor or pleasure.
I don't think I've ever said those words in my life. So back to the Bruce Springsteen concert. So I was under the impression, and I've heard this, and the information is probably wrong, but Bruce Springsteen wanted to make the concert very affordable, right? And I don't know, did he hire Live Nation or Ticketmaster, or one of those companies decided that they wanted to do pricing, right? The same way Uber does pricing. So the more people that are on there, the more that they're going to be charged for the tickets. And that's how the pricing got so out of control.
I think that the out of control ticket prices go back to about 94, when
Right.
the smartest man in the music industry, most people will tell you this, is a guy named Irving Azoff, who manages the Eagles, Journey, Christina Aguilera, the estate of Van Halen, just everything. And Irving Azoff was the first person to do over $100 US ticket prices. And they did that for the Eagles, I think in 94, 93, 94, somewhere around there. And no one said, I'm sorry, everyone said, no one's going to pay $100 for a ticket. You kidding me? And it kind of evolved. Irving, but beyond all that success of managing, ran a record label or two in his day, but also he eventually got promoted to the head of Ticketmaster, and then he merged Ticketmaster and Live Nation. Then he also basically took over part of MSG Entertainment, and then there were some lawsuits related to them kind of monopolizing certain venues, going, if you play this venue, you can't play that venue. And Ozzy Osbourne's wife and manager, Sharon, was in one of the lawsuits to kind of sue against that. So there's a lot of weird stuff in the music industry that the everyday person doesn't know about until it goes to court.
So it's kind of like a monopoly, right? It's kind of like the mafia. Hey, you sign with us, you can't play here.
Yeah, so the number one in the US, not worldwide, number one in the US is Live Nation, and the number two is AEG. And you have to kind of pick to go, am I going to be a Live Nation or an AEG? And at a certain point, some of them defect. And AEG in the last 5, 10 years bought Bowery Presents. Do you guys know Bowery Presents?
No, I'm not familiar with them.
They started off with just having kind of the Mercury Lounge, the Bowery Ballroom, eventually Terminal 5, Webster Hall. And then they started doing out of state stuff out of New York, and AEG just bought them. So that became more venues that they kind of control. So somebody like AEG, I don't know, any given night, probably have 50 to 100 concerts going on. Live Nation, more than that.
But isn't there a huge inherent risk? I mean, we've planned events. Imagine planning an event for 20,000 seats. And what if no one shows? Isn't there a huge inherent risk to what Mark Anthony did? I mean, kudos to him for pulling it off. But what if you don't sell those tickets? You're stuck with, I could only imagine what it would be for venue, lighting, professionals, advertisements. It'd be obscene.
On the surface, it seems that way. But then some venues and promoters do this concept called papering, which is, oh, the tickets are a little light. Let's just get people in the door. Hey, how many tickets do you need? 6, 8, 12? You get them in the door because if they charge for parking, they make money on parking. If they're cutting on the concessions and the merchandise, they cut in on that too. So you take a venue like Jones Beach on Long Island, New York, near where I am, and you look and you go, ooh, there's a lot of empty seats. Well, you're going to see later in the show more people file in, and they're kind of hoping that they just clean up at the beer stands and the merch table and all that kind of stuff.
Tricks of the trade.
Yeah, I think so. And also, by them buying 30 to 50 dates on a tour, like, okay, we lost our shirt at Jones Beach, but you know what? In Detroit, we crushed it. And Cleveland, we crushed it. You kind of learn that certain towns are walk-up towns. Certain towns are better for rock, certain for country. Certain ones, the opening act is going to draw a lot of people. There's smart tactics and smart people in the trade.
Hey, Darren, walk us through these valuations for these global libraries. I remember years ago when Michael Jackson bought the Beatles library, there was a lot of news and buzz on that. But why are these libraries just estimated at such high valuations?
My honest opinion, that's going to be unpopular among some of your listeners, is that these people who are buying it are getting scammed and have no idea what they're buying or what the value of it is. And it's either a loss leader, ignorance, and or they're like, oh, let's do something cool. I want to be in entertainment. I want to be a producer. And they have no idea what they're doing. Because when I saw that Justin Timberlake, I don't remember if that was a $50 or a $100 million purchase, but they didn't, from what I read, they didn't buy any futures. So it's like, let's say he has this big revitalization. They don't have any interest in future catalog. Stupid. Motley Crue, I believe, was a $100 million for the recordings, not the publishing. And you go, you guys are so stupid. How are you going to make back $100 million on Motley Crue? It's dumb. The money's behind us. Maybe like 40, 50 million will come back over time. But over time, and you laid out $100 million, there's a lot of dumb people in that trade. You can tell me I'm wrong.
So I just want to make sure I understand this properly, right? So when we're talking about a catalog, we're talking about music that was already created, right? So when you said future rights, it's no future music that comes out, correct?
Sometimes. There's a lot of pieces to the musical pie. If I was to explain music publishing to you as a non-music industry person, that might be about 5 hours. Because most songwriters don't understand music publishing, and they're the ones who created it. But the music publishing is essentially like music real estate. Like it's in the air. It's imaginary. There's no physical part to that component of it. And most times people don't understand it. But there's a lot of different associated rights and splits and royalty streams. So that's separate from the recordings, which is separate from the logos and the likeness, which is separate from other stuff too. It's separate from the touring. It's separate from the assets that you may have purchased to create all this kind of stuff.
Mhm. So essentially they're all separate companies, basically, is the way that I would look at it, right? And you're
If
purchasing one out of it instead of the conglomerate, you're buying a division of the company.
Yeah, if they set up their business correctly. Sometimes you find once there's a lawsuit that bands did not set up their businesses correctly, whereas other bands were smart with pass-through companies and the royalties go there, and then the touring company is this one, which loses money intentionally, and then the building is owned by them and the merchandise is owned by them. You see different levels of intellect going on.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting. I never thought of it that way, but I mean, we've set up a ton of different companies, right? That for the same, not for touring, but to have a loss at the end of the year, right? So it may be a loss leader for us in a different division of our company, right? Maybe
Yeah.
losing money where the overall company is making money at the end of
Yeah.
the day.
Yeah, sorry to cut you off here, but what I was saying before about how the lawyers know the deal terms for their other clients, some of the greatest uh, business managers and accountants handle the same clients. So, for example, without saying the name of them, the same accounting company in Midtown West controls, or at least controlled the last time I checked, Rolling Stones, U2, Springsteen, Shakira, uh, Bowie's estate, a lot of people. They know their Delaware pass-through companies.
I like them.
Yeah,
We're gonna have to talk after the show about that one.
sure, sure. But there's smart people and there's dumb people in any trade. There's successful and unsuccessful. There's flukes. It's hard to say. Springsteen is his own animal, and he himself, I thought I remember 9 months or so ago, sold his recorded rights for 4 or 500 million back to Sony, which means the catalog reverted to Bruce Springsteen. So they had a reversion deal in place.
Yeah, that still boggles my mind. We're gonna have to talk about that one a little bit in general. How you could sell it and then reverts back. That makes no sense to me, but I'm sure it makes sense to one of those brilliant accountants at that firm.
Yeah,
Darren, can you name us one musician out there, one artist that just has a reputation in the industry for being super sharp and astute when it comes to his business affairs?
earlier, Matt said the name Gene Simmons, and he is definitely up there because Gene Simmons has made a lot of money also outside of the music business with real estate. But Gene Simmons's MO has always been spending other people's money. The Donald Trump kind of thing where you license your own name out. And if it's a failure, you bury it. And if it's a huge success, you tell everybody how it's such a big, big success. So Gene Simmons has had so many failures, but most people kind of forget those failures.
Yeah, I think when your name's in the bright lights, most of the time, nobody sees what's going on behind the scenes, right? When it's dark. So
Yeah.
I take my hat off to him because he definitely knows how to monetize, but I'm sure he's taken some losses and lumps, just like every other successful person that I know, right?
Usually not with his own money. It's always with somebody else's money. He took
OPM,
loss.
other people's money.
So he got paid up front in almost all those cases. He knew better. So you see a lot of people who are just money printing factories with like always using someone else's money, no risk, over and over and over again, and being able to inflate statistics in their favor.
Interesting. So, Darren, you got a lot going on, man. And you were telling us about the show that you have out there. You also run a really cool podcast, the Paltrowcast, right? Tell us a little bit more about the show, where the audience can find them, where they can find your podcast as well.
Sure. So the Paltrowcast content goes on the TV show and the podcast feeds, Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio, etc. And that's every week. I put up one episode that's under 30 minutes. That's between 1 and 3 of the interviews I taped. But pretty much all the other interviews I do go on my YouTube channel under the name Paltrowcast. And that's, It's not hard to find me. That's what I'm trying to say. You put it in the name in the Google machine, it comes up for better and for worse. I started doing these interviews when I was 16. That was 20 something years ago. And for better and for worse, there's a footprint out there.
Best
Darren,
interview ever, Darren.
Ah,
Who is it? Who is it? Who's your best interviewee ever?
you knew we were going there. You had to.
no, I didn't know that. There's so many different interviews that were great for different reasons. Like the first time I interviewed Gene Simmons, for example, I thought he was just going to make fun of me for like 3 hours. And he turned out to be super pleasant, awesome, not kicking me out of the hotel room. And like, what else do you want to know? What else do you want to know? And he remembers everything. So in other words, I was expecting and fearing the worst. And he was so nice that it goes the opposite.
Yeah, we're not going to let you off that easy. Tell me about the craziest interview. Let's go there.
Let me just give a general statement. In this Zoom era of interviewing, because most interviews are over Zoom or StreamYard, or what are the other ones? What's the Microsoft one?
Teams?
Yeah, Teams. You got all those. And a lot of the times, this is something that people don't talk about. A lot of the times you're interviewing talent, the publicist or a handler or multiple ones are on the line and typing things at you while you're doing this. And you can't sell that that's going on, that they're going like 3 minutes asking them about this. It's like sometimes I'm taping these interviews and the people are like, compliment them on their beauty. That way that they can work in their beauty endorsement. And you go, oh my God. But you can't facially sell this. You can't acknowledge that this has happened. And you're thinking, oh, they're going to think I'm such a creeper for complimenting that they look great. So you get a lot of that kind of garbage and like, you can't ask that. And please edit this out. Like you tape this wonderful interview. I did this K-pop boy band over the weekend. And it was at a weird time of day because they were in Korea. And I thought it went amazing.
We just lost our whole audience. Come back, guys. Come back. He was just kidding about the K-pop guys.
The K-pop guys were the nicest. The publicist on the line was the nicest. Oh, man, we love that. That was amazing. I said, let me know if you need to edit anything out. Nothing. That was perfect. So I'm like, okay, I post it. And the next they're like, take it down right now. Why? The boys were not wearing their stage makeup, and their label does not want this out there. Well, can I use the audio? I don't know. Let me check. So, like, there's so many stupid restrictions that lead to, like, weird scenarios. And it's almost like the more famous the person, the easier it's going to be. And the more working class the person, the more crazy restrictions that are coming out of nowhere.
Really? So let me ask you, is it like when you hire talent for an event, right? They have all these restrictions, writers. When you're doing these type of podcast interviews with them, are they sending you over the same type of contracts to read and sign before you even get them on? Sometimes.
Usually not.
Okay.
And then usually you figure out the artist has no idea what's in their contracts or list of demands. Those are just for their idiot handlers to try and protect their.
Although Matthew, Darren's handler did say he only wants yellow-colored M&Ms.
That stuff is in the riders. It turned out that was in Van Halen's rider because David Lee Roth said, well, if they miss that, then they won't have paid attention to the staging requirements or the lighting, and the stage can collapse. So there was genius behind that, but people have taken that a little too far. I just find handlers often think they're protecting their artist, but are making it worse and just trying to justify their paycheck like they're doing something when they're not. So that's one of the things I hate about the entertainment industry, the hanger-ons.
Darren, one personal question for me. Why don't the Beastie Boys get the due respect that they're owed?
Okay, this is not going to be a 20-second answer. Do you Is that a yes? You want the answer?
All right, go for it, buddy. Go for it.
Okay.
Give us the brass monkey.
I see what you did. The Beastie Boys is a complex one because they kind of disowned their original image, because the original image was very inspired by professional wrestling and Rowdy Roddy Piper and being bad guys. And so they were saying stuff that was misogynistic and shaming. Like, I'm not allowed to say what the original album title of License to Ill was. Just see if you can Google this up, because if I said it, there would be some problems. It's not a title that would age well. So the Beastie Boys went from being that to super woke and Tibet loving and all that. So they definitely complicated their legacy a little bit. They also have said no to lots and lots of things, and they also didn't tour regularly. So I think when you just don't tour for long periods of time, you're not media friendly, you don't do interviews, and you're old. Because face it, if you're like 20, you think the Beastie Boys are grandpas at this point, putting on the woke glasses. So I think that they've not made themselves cool for a lot of reasons. Second, cool for me to open a second liquid lunch beverage.
Go for it, sir. Go for it. You know, Darren, look, we really appreciate you being here. We want to be respectful of your time, right? So, can you just tell everybody where they can find you? Is it Paltrowcast on YouTube, everywhere? Or do you have anywhere else on the socials?
Use the last name Paltrowitz, Paltrowitz, like Gwyneth Paltrow with the its. Use it on the Google machine, on the YouTube, on all that kind of stuff. And more stuff than you were hoping for will come up. Same with Spotify and Apple. And, it's that Seth Godin long tail effect, for better and for worse, you know?
I love that. Last question before I let you run.
Sure.
Luigi hit you with the one question I want to ask before, right?
Yeah.
And I usually ask everybody this one word, right? But I'm going to change it up for this episode.
Please.
Favorite song of all time?
Oh, good question.
By Van Halen.
What was it?
Hot for Teacher by Van Halen.
Nice. I love that. Darren, thank you so much, buddy. We appreciate you being here. Guys, that's a wrap of the Liquid Lunch Project. We'll see you on the next episode.
Thanks for having me. Sorry, K-pop fans.
Darren, you're so eloquent. I love it.
I wouldn't say eloquent's the word. It's just
You're very well spoken.
I'm ready. I think that's what it is. I'm ready.
He's been doing this for so long; it's just natural to him.
Yeah,
this is how he goes.
My first 18 years of interviews sucked. I promise that. I like anytime there's an old thing, I edit it heavily. Now I leave the mistakes and you own up to it. But you guys are great, and you're a pleasure to speak with. And anything I can do to help, you name it.
We appreciate it. Look, you fulfilled our dream. You know, our podcast is very, very business centric. So we wanted to talk business, but also kind of spice it up. So we really thank you. And Darren, we have this tradition on the Liquid Lunch Project. We'd like to send our esteemed guests, yourself, a beverage of their choice. So let us know what beverage you prefer. Shoot us an email with your address. We'll send it out to you.
You're too kind. We'll be in touch on that end. Thank you.
All right. Awesome.
All right. Thanks, Darren.
And give your wife our warmest regards.
Likewise. Take care now.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye.